All right. Good morning, Fierce Fam. Maganda umaga. I hope you're all doing well and having a wonderful Saturday morning. On behalf of the Fierce Coalition, I want to welcome you all to the 2024 FilAm Policy Symposium, one of our highly anticipated annual events here at the Fierce Coalition. It is such an honor and privilege to be with you all here. We'd like to start off with some brief introductions of our MCs, which includes me. So my name is Cameron Sasai. I have been serving as Lead Filipino's Public Policy and Advocacy Coordinator since last August, working to build up the policy leg of Lead Filipino. And I want to quickly share a bit about our organization and what we do. So Lead Filipino, LEAD stands for Leadership, Education, Activism, and Dialogue. And we're an incorporated charitable nonprofit, cultural and educational organization driven by the hearts of students, adults, and families out of San Jose, California. From curating Filipino cultural events and programs in San Jose to forming strong partnerships across California, we advance issues of civil rights, social justice, and economic empowerment for FilAm communities. Through our involvement with the Filipinx Igniting Engagement for Reimagining Collective Empowerment, FIERCE Coalition, we cultivate statewide frameworks for FilAm communities to engage in social issues around ethnic studies, housing and affordability, mental and behavioral health, and public safety. Each year, we serve thousands of community members locally, regionally, and statewide. So now I'll pass it over to Nikki to introduce herself and her organization.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Chan. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am also your co-MC for the day. I also serve as the co-executive director for Empowering Marginalized Asian Communities in Stockton, California. Our mission at EMAC for short is to help build safe and thriving Southeast Asian communities within the AAPI diaspora. Shout out to all my Central Valley Pinoys if you're here joining us today. Last year's symposium, I was actually on a panel, and this year I happened to be emceeing. So I'm always so I'm always so excited to rep Fierce. Anything Fierce says, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm down, whatever y'all need me to do. So super excited to keep going with this coalition and really excited for all of you all to join us today. Before we actually begin our program, we are going to have Commissioner Kieran joining us with a video to open up the space with a land acknowledgement. So Commissioner Kieran has worked in education, health, and human services and various nonprofit organizations in San Diego, primarily in organizations serving API and underrepresented communities. And she also serves as the commissioner of the California Commission of Asian and Pacific Islander American Affairs. So we're going to use this time right now with the land acknowledgement to collectively pause to acknowledge and reflect on the land where we stand at this very moment. So Cam, can you?
Good morning and welcome everyone to the Filipinx Igniting Engagement for Reimagining Collective Empowerment, the Fierce Coalition's 2024 FilAm Policy Symposium. My name is Corinne Amiling Macapugay. I'm very honored to welcome you all this morning as we will take on multiple issues affecting our communities. But before we do that, we wanted to provide a land, a people, and labor acknowledgement. We recognize that here in California, from the Kumeyaay to the Ohlone peoples, all throughout the state, there are indigenous people who continue to fight for land rights, who continue to be stewards of this land and of their communities. We acknowledge that this country was also built on the labor and lives of people who were enslaved from Africa and continue to face systemic oppression and discrimination. We ask that all of you acknowledge your own history, your ancestors, your stories, and all the ways that we have been brought here together now, together today. We do this work. We talk about issues. We talk about policy. We talk about change. We do this because we love our communities. Not just our FilAm communities, but our sibling communities as well. Because we understand that our liberation is tied to one another. We understand that we are not free until all of us are free. So today we hope that you take the time and their energy to hear from our grassroots leaders, our community organizers, our activists, our folks who work on the ground in the streets for the empowerment and the betterment of our communities. We ask that you take the time to listen to and engage our decision makers, our elected officials, our appointed officials, who are also in places to create change. But they can't do that unless we speak up, until we make sure that our voices are heard. We thank you for choosing to spend a Saturday with us. You know, there's a lot going on this weekend, and there are many other things that you could be doing with your time. But we are honored that you have chosen to share space with us. And we hope that you will learn and that you will carry forth not only the lessons from today, not only the strategies, but the ongoing hope and the reasons why we continue to push forward for each other. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for that incredible labor acknowledgement, Professor Mack. Today at the symposium, we are statewide, so please let us know in the chat or comments where you're joining in from. So right now, I'm joining in from my home here in Manalo, California, and would love to know where you are all at.
Thanks, Carmen. Like I said, I am out in Stockton, also as Yoka to Miwaklan out here in the Central Valley. And thanks for all for joining us today. I know here in California time, it is really early in the morning. I know we usually when we have these things, we have folks from all over the nation actually always joining us. So just some recap of FIRST. Again, we are the Filipinx Igniting Engagement for Reimagining Collective Empowerment Coalition. We are a progressive coalition of 15 FilAm nonprofits, community-based organizations, and collegiate groups from across California that come together on statewide social justice issues.
Thanks so much for the background, Nikki. I'd love to turn all of our collective attention to the importance of this really historic general elections in November and turning out the FilipinX Vote and advocating for progressive policies in Sacramento amidst a budget deficit. And at a population of 1.5 million, not much is really known about our economic power here as one of the largest Asian Pacific Islander groups in the state. So since 2018, FIRST has hosted an annual FilAm Policy Symposium to hold a space where social justice and equity issues impacting our statewide communities can be amplified and spotlighted, and also where we can speak to the issues of statewide importance and develop policy priorities to move our communities forward. In 2018, our first FilAm Policy Symposium was hosted at UC Davis and brought together over 100 FilAm students, parents, community, and civic leaders to discuss how exactly we could build our presence on statewide policy and legislation, particularly in the areas of ethnic studies and economic justice. And over the span of 6 years, FIRST has helped pass state legislation around ethnic studies and public safety, most recently with over 30 legislators to pass AB 490, the Justice for Angelo Quinto bill, which banned positional asphyxia in California.
Thanks, Carmen. So far in the last 6 years, FIRST has been able to really bring us all together as organizations, as community members, and aims to create a learning community of students, parents, and activists to directly engage in our democratic process. Carmen mentioned that Filipinos are one of the largest Asian demographics here in California, and there's so many of us and so much power that has yet to be tapped in. And I think Commissioner Karen said that we can't get free unless we are all free. And us throughout the state are building all that together at FIRST. Before we get started, just to go over some logistics, as a friendly reminder, this is a community space and this is a safe place. So we will not tolerate any hate speech, discrimination, or trolls. Please respect our speakers and panelists and each other zooming in here. We do after each, usually we'll have some Q&A with some of the speakers. So you all will be able to comment any questions that you guys have that you want to ask our speakers and guests. I think we are live on Instagram and Facebook. Is there anything else, Cameron, or is that it?
I think that's about it.
So,
Thanks, Nikki.
Yeah, we are all live on there. And we're so privileged to have an array of speakers and guests that'll be sharing the awesome work that they do, that they do. And first off, we're going to open up our guests with our keynote speaker, Mayor Juslyn Manalo. Did y'all know Mayor Juslyn was actually the first Filipino American elected in 2016 to city council in Daly City? Y'all, that was 2016. How many Filipinos live in Daly City before 2016? So she was actually the first Filipino elected in 2016 in city council. She became mayor in 2018, 2021, and now recently elected again in 2024. Actually last year, I was privileged enough to spend some really good time with Mayor Juslyn out in the Philippines through our Filipino Young Leadership Program. So I got to know her really good, really great, and I'm so excited to introduce her. And we also love to see Pinoys breaking barriers. After her address, we'll have a Q&A open for her. So please share any questions and comment. Please share any questions in the comments, and we will pin your questions and ask her after the talk. So Cameron, can we bring on Mayor Juslyn to the screen?
Absolutely. Welcome, Mayor.
Oh, hi. Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. This is so amazing. The coalition of organizers, community members, really, truly blessed to be with all of you this morning. I just wanted to say that I'm so thrilled to see the amazing engagement that will be happening today. You know, the significance of this policy symposium, engaging our Filipino FilAm community is huge because we understand that it's so important to shape the policies that are out there and to advocate for that change is so important. One thing that was mentioned, when we know we're united, there's truly strength in numbers. And with what Fierce is doing throughout California is huge. And with collaboration, impact happens, and what we're able to do is create that change we want for our community, with and for our community. I'm so grateful that Lead Filipino, I got connected with Lead Filipino in 2017 with Dr. Angelica Cortez with Fly Pinay Summit. It's very, very green here in my office, right? If I'm not moving. But really, it was an amazing Fly Pinay Summit in which I was humbled to also keynote with so many amazing Pinays in 2017. So I want to just share my personal journey with all of you. Like many, our immigration story, our stories to the United States. My mother moved to the United States at the age of 24. Had no family, moved to South of Market, San Francisco, and really was where the start of our family happened. She got married. So I grew up in South of Market, went to Bessie Carmichael there. And then later, where many Filipinos moved, I moved to Daly City and grew up and was raised in Daly City and learned so much about my culture from my family. But what really shaped my activism was through my collegiate experience. It was through Kappa Psi Epsilon, a women-based organization in college, as well as the Filipino World War II veterans issue. That really ignited something within me around an injustice that our elders were facing. That the United States passed a law that was really egregious. And that really sparked my engagement around being politically activated and worked on a national campaign going with our World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. And that is firsthand where I learned around going through legislative visits, going to senators and Congress men and women, educating them about our heroes and heroines and what they did and the injustice they faced. And so in the role I am now, I continue to remember the roots of advocacy on the nonprofit level, on the organizing level, because as mentioned earlier, it's really through our lived experiences that we need to have at the forefront, whether it's on a local, statewide, or national level, as well as globally. We know that our roots as Filipinos and Filipino Americans are huge. We know that in our spirit, we have the resilience and we have fought struggles, and we bring the same resilience in the spaces and places where we are today. I look back at those times in which I organized as a student organizer, and I'm so blessed because even in the place of policy today where I am, I take those moments and I work with the nonprofit grassroots. I want to hear from them. What is happening on the ground? And have an open door policy to be able to work with our community on the ground and create the policies together and not in a silo. And so I am so honored and blessed that, I've continued this journey here in the city of Daly City. And some of the experience I want to share with all of you is that even as a woman, a Filipino woman, I remember looking back and seeing no Asian American women or Filipino women on council, when I was in high school. And I didn't understand that. It just went through my mind. And so in the spaces, even, as a woman, here at City Hall, we now have nursing stations where community members are able, if they're going to a City Hall meeting, there's a space for nursing mothers. The other day, a woman employee came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for leading on this because I also use this." And so coming from our lived experiences, during my 2018 term, I was pregnant with my first son. And I'm just sharing with all of you how that connectedness is. There was nothing there at that time. And so we bring our experiences so that others as a collective can now, have that equity that we are continuously striving for day in and day out. It's not always easy, being the first. And I said, I'm not going to be the last. And, I've been in spaces and places where you would think in 2017, 2018, that comments or stereotypes would have been broken. I went to a regional meeting. I signed up. It was around a water regional meeting. I put my name in. I put vice mayor at that time. And the gentleman in front of me said, "So where's the vice mayor?" I'm like, did I not sign in and put my name? And so these are those stories where we need to continue to be in places of representation, up and down, as commissioners, as elected officials, as continued nonprofit leaders, so that these barriers are broken and that it is no longer a question of if I am the vice mayor when I just signed my name in front of you. And so we have so much more to go, but I am also so hopeful that when my child, Giselle, who's 3 years old right now, that she will not face that. And in whatever profession she chooses, there will not be that bias. And so this is what we do together as a community. We break barriers, we also continue to lift our communities together. And I'll say this right now, we need to stop any form of crab mentality that has been stemmed from colonialism. And I see it in our communities today. And fierce, I'm saying that we're breaking those stereotypes and stopping crab mentality. And I see that today with the Fierce Coalition. I see that in the next generation. And I see that we will not take those. I've seen it in the past, and we will break those barriers. And how we all shared, let's be honest in our experiences, right? And so we are here to lift each other up. And there is more than enough because we are a collective community. So I'm hopeful because in so many spaces, we need to be there. And I want to share one also, one thing I talk to young people about is that we need to be everywhere in order to affect our social change that we want to see. We have to be everywhere. We need to be in the grassroots organizations. We need to be in the private sector, being able to affect that structure, because that's where we'll be able to impact every part of society in order to uplift our communities and really create that change. So, I am also the chair for the Filipino American Democratic Caucus. And in that, many have paved the way for us to have our own caucus at the party. We're looking at opportunities for young people to get training if you want to move into elected office and have the resources, because we need more of you in all these spaces, and have your voice at the table. I'm so hopeful and grateful because in 2024, I know that we are able to impact change. We have an Attorney General that is Filipino American, Attorney General Rob Bonta, at one of the highest levels of state government. And it's really breaking those barriers, as well as always remaining connected to the roots of our community. So I applaud all of the nonprofits here, the leaders that continue to do the groundwork to the community day in and day out. And we need to do this work collectively together. And I feel that today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Am I good with time? Are we going to keep on going? Hey, sister, doctor, how are you?
I'm doing well. We are living here, and we have not just a statewide attendance today. I was looking Riverside, shout outs to Fresno, to areas across the San Jose South Bay area, Central Valley, Los Angeles, Daly City, San Francisco, but some folks tapping in from Las Vegas, I think I saw. But very blessed to be here in your presence. You are such an ardent supporter and champion, not just of our community, but building pipelines for us and showing us that these spaces are rightfully and righteously intended for us. And it matters that we see folks like you in these spaces. So thank you for all that you do. And all I'm doing for the next few minutes, Mayor Juslyn, is bringing up some of these questions that have come through our multiple Facebook platforms. So everybody, we are live on X. We're live on X, LinkedIn, Facebook, on Fierce Coalition, Lead Filipino, and both Instagram pages. So we're coming at you across multiple channels. But Mayor Juslyn, we have a couple new questions that have come through the chats here. So I'll get right to it. Someone from Daly City wants to know what your policy priorities are for Daly City, if you could speak sort of at a high level around what you're focusing on as mayor this year for your city.
I'm happy to share what we're doing here in Daly City. Policy priorities I have is continuing to push for more affordable housing in our communities. We need more of it, and we need to strategically find ways to have our communities remain in Daly City. We know that the Bay Area is really expensive, and so we're looking at ways to do that. One of our parcels that are city owned is targeted to be for affordable housing in the Bayshore community. And so we're looking at all aspects to do so. We just recently passed a 1,100 unit project in Daly City in partnership with the Jefferson Union High School District that will provide revenue for that school district, but also have an affordable housing component, which I advocated for an increase to 20% in that project. And so that affordable housing portion of it will actually have, a percentage of for older adults that have that need the extra support. Also, childcare will be on that site. Affordable childcare will be on site. So it's a very comprehensive project that didn't take overnight to build the community benefits infused in it. And so at large, when I talk to all of you, when there are projects in your community, it's important to stand up, speak up, say what those needs are, because it's an opportunity to ensure that there is a private-public partnership or a public-public partnership with the school district, the city, with a private entity, and the city to ensure we get the needs of our communities heard.
Wow, that first, let me just congratulate you. That's major. And I love your emphasis on the focus around aging adults, because I feel like our society generally just tends to forget about our seniors and they're entirely pushed to the margins. So congratulations, that's amazing. And housing justice and tenant protections, these are among several of the key sort of legacy items of the Fierce Coalition. So we will be hearing a presentation later, because today, actually, Mayor Juslyn, as you know, we use our symposium every year to lay the groundwork and hear directly from our communities as we prepare for our FilAm Advocacy Day in Sacramento. And something that I wrote down, a quote that you said, we bring our resilience to the places and spaces we are in today. And I especially appreciated your remarks around promoting and facilitating and cultivating our representation across multiple sectors and industries and fields, of course, in appointed and elected spaces, but also as nonprofit organizers, advocates, artists, healers, educators. So I appreciate you saying that, and also acknowledging, the necessity around the private sector, that there are large groups of FilAms that are in tech and in the innovation economy, and of course in healthcare. So leadership across all those spaces. This next question is about imposter syndrome and any advice that you might have, kind of going back to that story, that individual who dared question greatness in his presence of where the vice mayor was. He was looking right at her, right? But this question came in around, do you have any advice for individuals that are wanting to lead in their respective spaces, but still navigating feelings of imposter syndrome?
I will say that know that, and I'm speaking to everyone, if you have that feeling, know that you are enough. Know that this system creates us to feel this way, right? And that's why know that you are enough as a Filipina, as a Filipino, we are generations deep with ancestors that have been revolutionary, that have impacted so much of our communities in that fighting spirit. Know that you are enough. And even more so, You have so much in you. Look at the ancestors before you and take that spirit within you, as well as know that you take that leap of faith, because all you need to do is take that leap of faith, and the community is with you. You know, our ancestors are with you. And when that imposter syndrome comes to play, bring all of that with you and just move forward and know that you're doing it for the community and that the community is around you. That's what you got to do. Just keep moving and using that spirit. You know, I was able to go to the Philippines, and as mentioned, saw a lot of the history and how our communities back pre-colonial, you know, had so much enrichment, and it was really had the riches and like so much culture that was taken away, right? And so it stems from that. It stems from the imposter system is connected to that psychology, which we need to break free from. And so for those of you that feel that, you know what? Break through that. You can, and you are enough. And just be there at that table, because we need you. The community needs you.
I think that's a wonderful note to just express and extend our gratitude to you, Mayor Juslyn, for jumping on the line with us on a Saturday morning. We know you're incredibly busy. So on behalf of our coalition, thank you. We look forward to supporting you. And
thank you so much as well. Let me know how to support all of you and in your advocacy. We all do this together in the Binding Hunt spirit, all collectively for our community. So thank you so much for all your leadership and for everyone on here.
Thanks, Mayor Juslyn. And just recapping of what she said, what really stood out to me as you were talking is a quote that came to my head is, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. And, you know, I'm so glad there's people like Mayor Juslyn, there's spaces like FIRST and the organizations we have in our coalition that continue to build new tables. And for me, sometimes I don't want to be at their table. I like to sit in the grass, in the sun, not in a stuffy conference room, and I like to bask in the sun on my banig. So Mayor Juslyn also brought up the resilience of our communities and how our ancestors are always with us. And for me, that serves as a motivation to keep going and keep fighting on. What did you think, Cameron?
Exactly that, Nikki, and thank you again so much for the incredible keynote, Mayor Juslyn. I just want to say thank you for all you do for your community in Daly City, and also what you do to expand your impact past Daly City to our communities here in California. And I'm so proud to witness that firsthand, and so thankful for the barriers that you broke down. And because of that, our next generation of FilAm leaders can really walk through those doors. So as you said, you were the first, but not the last. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much as well. And on a last note, you know, I know we have this as a Filipino American Symposium, but it's also around our collective efforts as communities of color, right? And it's having that allyship with other communities that we also continue to build and have that empowerment. And so I'm so grateful for both of you and your leadership and all of the amazing community members that are here today. So salamat, I'm so grateful, and I'll be watching the rest. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mayor Juslyn. Yeah. We really appreciate you being here. So now I'll transition us into the very first panel of today's event by introducing my friend and colleague, Kevin Suarez. So Kevin is an accounting services professional and a dedicated Filipino-American community advocate. A San Francisco Bay Area native, Kevin attended San Jose State University, earning his Bachelor of Science in Economics. He's currently at the registered public accounting firm Ernst & Young in the audit assurance practice. Kevin's desire to see additional representation in the accounting and finance services industries led him to join up as the executive vice president of the San Francisco chapter of the International Society of Filipinos in Finance and Accounting, an organization that is dedicated to educating, training, and mentoring emerging Filipino and Filipino-American professionals in the accounting and financial services industries. Kevin is a proud alumnus of EPYC, Empowering Youth Through Collaboration, the National Federation of Filipino-American Associations Youth Program, and was most recently elected as NaFFAA's Northern California Region Chair in 2022. Kevin has also been a member of the San Jose-based organization Lead Filipino since 2017, and is also a member of the Sacramento-based Political Action Committee, SAC-FilPAC. Kevin's goals with these organizations is to help train, motivate, and inspire the next generation of Filipino-American community leaders to not just break the bamboo ceiling, but to also fully realize their potential in their given passions and careers. So before I pass it over to Kevin, I'll let everybody know that we have a 5-minute break coming up after this panel.
Thanks for that, Cameron. And thanks for that bio. Just looking back at Poly Symposium, getting involved with the very first one back in 2018, it's been an honor to kind of see the growth of how this Poly Symposium has grown and all the great legislation that we've supported and have actually passed these past going on 6 years. So as part of this panel, I wanted to introduce our honorable panelists. So first, we have our first panelist, the Honorable Nikki Fortunato Bas, Council President and from the city of Oakland. So Nikki Fortunato Bas is president of the Oakland City Council and represents District 2, one of the most diverse districts in the city. She is the first FilAm to be elected to Oakland elected leadership. Since taking office in 2019, she has championed community-centered policies and budgeting. She led the passage of the strongest COVID-19 eviction moratorium in the state of California, created a multi-million-dollar fund for community land trusts to prevent displacements and create permanently affordable community-owned housing, authored a ballot measure that created a progressive corporate tax passed by the voters in 2022, and led the last 2 biennial budgets, which have expanded and invested millions more in violence prevention and alternative crisis response. For 2 decades prior to being elected, Bas advocated for worker, environmental, gender, and racial justice. Learn more about her work as a council member here at the Oakland City website. Nice to have you on, Councilmember Nikki.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Daisy Maxion from Filipino Advocates for Justice. Daisy Maxion is Filipino Advocates for Justice Organizing Director. Daisy is a daughter of Filipino immigrants and is a native to the Bay Area in California. She started her organizing in her early years as a student leader in college. She served as the only Filipinx student body president across all 23 state universities at CSU East Bay in 2019 to 2020. She advocated on behalf of approximately 15,000 predominantly working-class BIPOC and POC students. Daisy has led Census 2020 collaborative efforts within Alameda County Complete Count Committee and AAPI organizations and communities. She coordinated volunteer recruitment during the 2020 election cycle, resulting in 175 plus volunteer shifts and 50 plus leaders developed during the SCF campaign. She had also worked as a community organizer for various civic engagement campaigns in which she participated in leading efforts for Get Out the Vote digital organizing, making it accessible for the Filipinx community. Maxion continues to lead outreach, legislative, and organizing efforts that advocate for housing justice, voting, and domestic worker rights within the Filipinx community. Our third panelist is the Honorable Dr. Janice Andrade O'Neill from the Asian American Voter Empowerment Project, LA. Dr. Janice Andrade O'Neill, a 1.5 generation immigrant from La Paz, Leyte, Philippines, immigrated to the US in 1995 and was raised in East Oakland, California as one of 7 siblings. She takes pride in nurturing her 3 children, Jayla, 7, Jade, 2, and Prince Charles Jr., 5 months. Having earned her bachelor's in sociology with a minor in urban education from UCLA and a master's in education from CSULA, she boasts over a decade of experience in nonprofit management throughout California, particularly in Los Angeles County. Recently awarded her doctorate in education from USC, specializing in organizational change and leadership, Dr. Janice currently holds the position of Community Engagement Manager for Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, where she spearheads citywide initiatives in disadvantaged, gang-impacted areas. Additionally, she's a dedicated business owner, committed to making a positive difference in people's lives through exemplary service and innovative solutions. And last but not least, we have Gabriel Young, a personal friend of mine and someone I've grown very close to over the years, representing National Federation of Filipino American Associations. From San Jose and Washington, D.C., Gabriel Young, he, his, strives to be one for and with others by serving the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community through multiple ventures. Gabriel currently works as a staff assistant for the White House Initiative on Asian Americans. Additionally, he's the operations manager for the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, NaFFAA, where he helps develop and implement strategies to increase civic engagement amongst the Filipino American community. Moreover, Gabriel serves as a policy, politics, and puto host at Lead Filipino. Recently, Gabriel graduated as an undergraduate honors student from the George Washington University with a BA in political science, public policy focus, and international affairs. Gabriel will begin his master's in public policy at UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy to hone his skills in developing socioeconomically equitable policies and laws while continually fighting for social justice. So thanks everyone for making the time to join this morning. And we have a pretty packed agenda with some very deep questions. So let's get right to it. So our first question is, why is there a sense of disengagement among voters, particularly in the Filipinx community? Are there specific historical or socio-political factors contributing to this disengagement?
I can go first on that one. So hi everyone, again, my name is Gabriel. Super happy to be here to represent NaFFAA and to understand NaFFAA as an organization today. As Jose Rizal said, those who don't look back on history will have no future to go to. No history, no self, but knowing history, no self. And so NaFFAA was founded as a FilAm civic engagement org in the wave of folks immigrating from the Marcos administration over in the Philippines into the US for economic opportunity. And wanting to empower FilAms, we wanted to change the mindset that no matter where you are here in the US, because of your diasporic move, you have a voice and you have an opportunity. And to do that, we attack it from a cultural lens where these historical socio-political factors of being Filipino, let alone being under the stereotypes of having to be obedient, can be flipped on its head by adding the hyphen of being FilAm, hence why in our name is National Federation of FilAm Associations. And by having that American identity attached to us allows us to feel that empowerment to go out into our communities and speak up and actually go to the voting booths and actually have the opportunity to make a change in our own communities as it is. Another thing I'd really like to add is that even today, whereas we still do have intergenerational gaps amongst voting, it's so important that we are empowering our youth. And so as Kevin mentioned, with EPIC being a part of his previous portfolio here at NaFFAA, EPIC is designed to do just that. And so we are making sure that these intergenerational conversations are being had to make sure that youth feel just as empowered to go back up into their older communities and break those stereotypes that have been imparted upon us.
Kevin, I'd like to answer this question if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, go for it, Dr. Janice.
Yes, so I forgot to add in my bio the most important thing. I was also the program director with Lead Filipino for the Asian American Voter Empowerment Project last year. And I'm still, working closely with Lead Filipino. But there's four things I think there's several factors that I feel like in order to really answer why there's so much disengagement in the Filipino American community with voting, and just the electoral process overall. I think the first thing is naturally we feel disconnected because from the political process, because there's the historical experiences of colonization, marginalization, and honestly discrimination. Mayor just explained, like, somebody just overlooked her, and that's powerful right there, because it's just like, I should not be overlooked. I worked this hard to get where I am. And then there's also language and cultural barriers. I think when we did boots on the ground, door to door canvassing last year here in Los Angeles, particularly in the Echo Park area, we really focused on Asian American households. And we noticed there was a huge cultural language barriers. And so I had to go to I had to go get multiple the voter reg paperwork that was in different languages. And I think even offering that and being able to communicate with our communities, that will enhance increase our voters. The other thing I think is there's limited access to information and resources. And so investing in coalitions like FIERS, Lead Filipino, and, Gabe, everything that you just mentioned, we need to enhance those and provide that type of education in our communities. And then the last thing I think, Councilmember Nikki, it's such an honor to hear from you, and Mayor Juslyn as well, and Rob Bonta. Like, this is amazing, but I think there's still a lack of representation. I think the absence in or visibility of Filipino role models in politics contribute to the feelings of disengagement in that process. And so those are the four things that I feel like is impacting being able to engage our Filipino American communities here in California, but across the U.S. So
Thanks for that, Dr. Janice. And one thing that you mentioned, right, was the difficulty of engaging folks with a language barrier, right? So one thing that we need to think about are, what are some innovative strategies and tools that you have all used to mobilize young voters and engage people intergenerationally, and in your case, Dr. Janice, multi-generational households?
I can start here, and then I think Daisy, yeah, you unmuted as well, so you can go next. Well, first I want to say it's really amazing to be here. Thanks for sharing my bio, Kevin. One of the things that I also wanted to share is that sometimes I think of myself as an accidental elected official because I was an organizer and advocate. I was really excited to be doing that work. One of the things that I did some years ago was I helped to start up Oakland Rising, which is a civic engagement coalition in Oakland, engaging our diverse communities, especially our people of color and low-income communities. And I say I'm an accidental elected official because there was a vacuum in Oakland politics in terms of having our council represent the progressive views of our electorate. And the district that I represent is actually the highest proportion of API voters. And we hadn't had an API representative in many, many years. And so I got recruited to run and help give voice to our community in Chinatown, in Little Saigon, and the Filipino community in Oakland. Over the 20 plus years that I've been living here has really gotten pushed and priced out. So our Filipino community now lives in places like Union City, where I know FAJ is organizing, in other places. But I wanted to share my experience as an elected official is really looking at ways that we can involve young people in decision making and really lift up the voices of young people. And so we have in Oakland an Oakland Youth Commission, and that commission is young people helping us shape policy and set priorities for the city council. And I've worked with them to make sure in our budget that they get stipends, so they're compensated for their work, that they have staff, that they have money for strategic planning. And we also have a program that sets aside part of our budget, literally $18 to $19 million a year of our budget for Oakland youth programs. And I made sure that that program, when it expired, went on for another 12 years. So using our budget to really leverage youth organizing and youth programs, as well as doing things like visiting senior housing and making sure, in partnership with groups like the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, which organizes in the API senior community, we're actually going to where people live and organizing them and really working on issues that people care about, like tenant rights or affordable housing. So I think there's a lot in terms of civic engagement and empowerment that really starts with organizing, to listening, to engaging people, and then working with electeds, not only to pass policy, but also to make sure that our budgets help to empower our youth and our seniors.
Thanks for that, Councilmember Nikki. So Daisy, going off of what Councilmember Nikki was mentioning, right? Strategic, setting aside programs specifically for youth. What are some things that FAJ has been doing regarding youth mobilization?
Yeah, thank you for your question and y'all's answers so far. It's literally everything that we're all working on the same things. It's so amazing to see that statewide. So yes, I am Daisy, organizing director with Filipino Advocates for Justice. We're a 50-year-old Filipino organization within the East Bay community, kind of being the visible anchor for thriving and Filipino API communities for the East Bay. So every day we work with folks for leadership development programs, civic engagement campaigns, and year-round youth programming. And I think it's important to recognize too the different strategies that we've done day in and day out to kind of adapt to voter fatigue, you know, like the disengagement in like electoral politics lately too, of recognizing that like when we're organizing folks, it doesn't start at the ballot box. It starts years before that. It's the relationships you're building within that medium time. Something that FAJ has been doing now is providing some third spaces. So it's just a routine space that we offer within our offices in Union City and Oakland. You know, folks being back from the pandemic, there's a need for reintegration and socialization and building that trust within the community members and getting them excited about recognizing like how politics affect them as well. Another thing is that we started a summer leadership development program in which we implemented now some civic engagement hard skills that the youth are using. This is like 20 youth in a 7-week program. They're learning how to phone bank, canvas, all of those stuff that no one's really taught unless you seek it out yourselves. So they're having conversations and having it door to door in their own communities that they live in and saying, hey, like I'm a youth from high school and we care about affordable housing. We care about housing justice. We care about our domestic worker rights, et cetera. So it's very powerful from that to come from the youth. And it also helps provide more hope intergenerationally to see what the future could really look like and kind of providing that vision for that.
Thanks for that, Daisy. Gabe, you mentioned that there were some efforts too from NaFFAA national side regarding youth engagement.
Yeah, definitely. So over in NaFFAA National, our Empowering Filipino Youth Through Collaboration, also known as EPIC, Cameron's had it as EPYC, is our essential program for getting out the vote and FilAm vote. So what we did was similar to Councilmember Bass and Daisy was we empowered our youth to be our organization's ambassadors because we all know Lolas and Lolos love going to the youth and being like, here, you tell me, I really want to talk to you. And so having that friendly voice is exactly what we wanted to do. And I really want to give a huge shout out to Councilmember Bass. I was raving about in my head. Paying our youth is the thing to have them get out the vote. So whether that make them youth organizers where they go out into their communities, or even giving them the tools such as for us over at NaFFAA, Canva Pro, or having them connected with One Down Media, is so huge for them to create their own voter guides and resources to make sure that whatever is on the ballot is explained thoroughly and also culturally appropriately. One other thing we also make sure we do for our ambassadors over at EPIC to mobilize them is not just make them feel tokenized in the sense of having them be our get out the vote ambassadors, but we supplement them with a mentor that also provides them with professional development as well. And so we make sure that we are tokenizing youth, one, but number two, that we are compensating our youth for the time that they are putting in to create the next generation of leaders across America.
Thanks for that, Gabe, right? And what you mentioned, right, building that leadership youth pipeline is essential in keeping all these efforts like Fierce, like LEAD, FAJ, kind of going past our generation to the next generation, right? And what you mentioned about voter guides, right? What resources are currently available to voters? And how do we ensure that accessibility and clarity regarding what is on the ballot for first-time or marginalized voters? So like, say, for example, this last primary, Proposition 1, this is about taxes. How is that relevant to my personal life, right? What are resources that are available to folks to kind of explain what's on the ballot?
Well, can I take this one on?
Sure, yeah.
I like to keep things simple because the ballot can get very confusing, and that's how we naturally lose a lot of people. Educational workshops, providing those. A lot of our orgs are already doing the educational workshop where we bring them in, show them a one-pager, educate them on each ballot measure, help them to understand in its simplest form. This is why this is why yes or no, and then let them decide on their own what they decide. But I think like even a one pager, something that makes it so easy. I remember I was going through that and I was like, what is this? What does this mean? And somebody gave me a one pager. I did my own research based on that one pager, and I was like, okay, I got it. And then I was able to make the best decision voting. But I'm all big for like one pagers. If you know Canva and can put it all together and digitally make it nice and pretty, I feel like those things, and you can sit with your parents on that. You can sit with youth. But to me, that's like a big thing that helped me when I was in college, learning about the election process and understanding all these ballot measures happening that I wasn't aware of. So.
Thanks for that, Dr. Janice. And I do believe Lead Filipino usually releases a general election voter guide. And I recall, does FAJ as well, Daisy?
Yes, well, we do have voter guides, but also we started our C4 organization called FAJ Action Fund, in which that we're able to do like endorsements and all that stuff. But as for FAJ, we just focus on like the get out the vote part, but we refer people to the sibling organization that will be like translated as well.
Awesome. And on that topic of voter engagement, right? How do we sustain voter engagement post-election? So after the March primary, after November, how do we ensure that voters are engaged and ensure that winning candidates stay accountable to the needs of the Filipinx community, right? Like, it's not enough that so-and-so won elected office, but how are we keeping you accountable that you're following through, right? And I see Councilmember Nikki.
Sure, I'd love to jump in here. Having come from organizing into elected office, I'm really trying to build something together with groups like Bay Rising, Oakland Rising, and others, AEPIs for civic empowerment. All of them have voter guides. Something called co-governance. We used to sort of talk about an inside-outside strategy for passing our policy campaigns. And I think a lot of that has evolved as more and more folks like Mayor Juslyn, myself, and others, folks from the community have come into elected office. And so this idea of co-governance is about, working with working with folks as they are seeking elected office to shape an agenda together, and once they're in, to work on those issues together. So as an example, housing affordability is so critical. Tenant protections is so critical. When I was organizing, I worked with the Oakland Community Land Trusts and a tenant rights organization called ACE. And we knew we had to do more in addition to creating affordable housing to protect tenants and to create home ownership. So before I entered office, we worked on a program so that tenants who were housing insecure could work with co-ops and land trusts to purchase their homes and make them permanently affordable. And then when I got into office, we created that program in our budget, and then we've been implementing it ever since. I saw that Lead Filipino is supporting the Bay Area Regional Housing Bond. That's something I'm engaged in. And so I think there's sort of a continuum as we work on particular issues to really develop policy together, to win them. And then really important is the implementation so that things don't just sort of go away, but really that's where the accountability comes in for electeds, really making sure we not only pass things, but we make sure that they're implemented and they actually happen as intended for the community.
Thanks for that, Councilmember Boss, and reading your bio, right? It was so much, the eviction moratorium must have been very important to so many households. So thank you for pushing that through. And, going into this next general election year, housing prices have frankly gone super crazy. So hoping that there are ways to work with community to kind of ease housing shortages and the overall state housing crisis.
Absolutely.
So on that topic, right, how do we get Filipino Americans to care about participating in the electoral process? And when some issues on the ballot that may not directly affect them, and also there's a lack of representation among candidates, right? How do we get folks to come out? So say, I remember in 2018, there were 10 propositions, right? Most average people would say, I don't have time to do research on 10 propositions. Why should I care? I live in, a community where Filipinos are 5%, right? What would you say to those individuals that, hey, these issues are still important for you to care about, and you should still look into your local candidates?
I can do a quick start off for it, but I think it's important to resonate within our communities that whether we like it, politics affects us personally as well. And I can even speak on my own experience of being like a young Filipino woman, like just growing up, you see in the news, like men having control over my reproductive rights. For example, you see things just like we are able to be in a position to vote for a government that cares about us, whether we're 5% of the population, whether X, Y, and Z, we're still a part of the community, and we still have a voice and say within that. And I love the piece that Councilmember Boss brought up about the co-governance aspect of it, because it's so important that there's no inside-out strategy, like we're working in collaboration. What does it look like to get a policy passed? But the after facts of it, because that's a whole other campaign of just the implementation, mobilizing folks, etc. So they're truly a reflection of what we're able to provide and being able to voice out what our concerns genuinely are. So it definitely affects us.
Yeah, I think the co-governance piece is huge. And Dr. Janice, would you want to speak to this too?
You saw me unmute. For AAVEP last year, our experience was you have to be persistent and you have to be consistent and you have to show that you care about the work in order for them to show that we care. For example, every Saturday we were at the Seafood City at Echo Park and we had a table there. And so out of the 6 organizers of us, we would split up and some would do phone banking, some would walk around and get, voters to register early. And then some of us would be there. But a lot of the people that kept coming back every Saturday eventually started seeing we're not going anywhere. We were there for months at a time. every Saturday. And so once they start seeing that, okay, they really are passionate about this. And eventually I started noticing the same Lola and mom duo, and they started, they slowly started coming over. I would just say hello, hi, friendly smile. She came over. Eventually, I think after like about a month of being in that location, and she finally sat down with me and was like, I'm not registered because I don't know, like, there's just a language barrier, there's cultural barriers. And, her seeing that we weren't going anywhere, that we're going to continue doing this work, that we're going to be there, made her comfortable, and that we're just not just going to leave and, we're not coming back. So I thought that was important, but I think having culturally relevant outreach, tailoring our outreach to the community, so we could resonate with the community's experience and understanding all of our cultural identities, especially in the Filipino American community, utilizing language appropriate materials, providing cultural events and community spaces to engage the Filipino American community. I feel like those are things that we can make civic engagement process fun, engaging, and we can bring in a lot of people. So we did that. We were part of a lot of events last year here in Los Angeles to try to get the vote, to try to get people to pre-register early with AAVEP. And our focus was the younger generation. And so earlier, I know I didn't get to answer number 2. I wanted to enhance social media and the use of it. Every time we went to an event, one of our organizers, Jasmine, was quick to put together a quick reel. It was like less than 30 seconds long, a reel, posted it right on social media, and you can get the younger voters out there and educate, hey, we're out here, come through. And so I thought that was really, that's important. But yeah,
Thanks for that, Dr. Janice. And to your point, right, I worked on a campaign back in 2020. TikTok, social media was super important to getting out the Gen Z vote. And Gabe, from your perspective, right, how do we get folks involved when there is a lack of candidates, or from a national perspective, right? California, we do have the luxury of having Councilmember Boss on the ballot, right, or Mayor Juslyn, but in Virginia or in other parts of the country, right, how do we overcome that challenge?
Definitely. So to ground ourselves, I want to bring up a quote from Larry Itliong that he stated, because in the Constitution, it said that everybody has equal rights and justice. You've got to make that come about. They are not going to give that to you. And so NaFFAA, as an organization for FilAms, recognizes that, again, as one of our panelists, I believe it was Daisy who mentioned, no, Nikki mentioned it, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so when we look across the country and the landscape of FilAms in elected office, we still see that it is a growing process, but we are also noticing a trend, which are pipeline programs. So one thing in EPIC that we highly push out is getting civically engaged, finding a representative or a council member or even a politician's office that you can work for so you can gain the experience to eventually be someone in power as well. And the best example of this is NaFFAA is a part of the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, also known as NCAPA. And one thing that we've been pushing recently that is a huge win for our communities is the White House's Office of Management and Budget. I know I'm saying a lot of acronyms right now. Statistical Policy Directive, also known as SPD 15, which for the first time since 1994 has disaggregated the data that the US collects. So for example, before it was just AAPI, but then it weren't the specific Pacific Islander groups that were there. Sometimes Filipinos were just lumped in and Asians, and folks couldn't differentiate that. And so the real power behind that comes from Nani Coloretti, a Filipino who was our keynote speaker at our 2022 National Empowerment Conference in Las Vegas and a NaFFAA friend, who is an example of that, where the more that we push FilAms to not even just run for office, but get into those offices and staff those principles, whether it be at the highest level in the president, in Congress, or even in your local state legislature, FilAms have an opportunity to push the FilAm voice and agenda and create that policy change. And so that is the biggest thing that we emphasize in NaFFAA, that sure, if a candidate doesn't look like you, if an issue on the ballot does not seem to affect you, what you are actually voting for is not just the opportunity for that person to win, but the opportunity for you to have a contact inside government who will actually make sure that, just as Mayor Just, that we are not the last, that we are an everlasting cycle of FilAms getting into policy.
Thanks for that, Gabe. And I echo your sentiments that data disaggregation is going to be super important to getting our community to get out the vote. So we're at time. And again, thank you for all of our amazing panelists here. We'll be taking a 5-minute break. So stay tuned. Go ahead and take a bio break, get some water, and we'll be rejoining in 5 minutes to continue with our program. Thanks, everyone.
All right, we are just coming back from our break, so I'll allow a few seconds for folks to jump back on. Well, that was a great panel that we had with some excellent speakers, and thank you again to all of our panelists who joined us here today to share their insights and experiences. Some of the quick takeaways I've had from that panel really was, we have to be intentional about bringing our community to the table, to be engaged in voting and making sure that we really foster that community within anywhere we are in the Bay Area. But one thing that stuck out to me really was, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so that really speaks to just going further than mobilizing the vote, but also encouraging folks to be civically involved, whether it's a board or commission or it's running for office. We need more FilAms at the table so we can lift from the bottom and get us all out there. So, Nikki, do you have any takeaways from the panel?
Sorry, I was on mute. I know we're still a few months away from November, but it's already been getting pretty wild. It's going to be a very interesting election year. But one thing that's been sitting with me was how Dr. Janice brought up the disconnection of voting and civic engagement in our communities. But the fact that we need to make these systems more accessible and have way more representation of our cultures. Through both my work at EMAC and our collaboration with FIERS, we recognize the importance of advocating for just and equitable policies in local, state, and nationwide. So again, today is just a prep day for Advocacy Day on April 30th at the Capitol in Sacramento. This will be a day of ledge visits, power and community building, and learning for our coalition members, youth, and adults we serve across California. So as we prepare for Advocacy Day, our next guest, this is actually the first time we're doing this. Our next guest will be presenting on policies that we are actively engaging in. And they're going to be giving us a look at the state of each policy and how we can support it. The two initiatives we're sharing today is on ethnic studies and housing. So let's bring up our first presenters, Tracy Noriega, who is the co-lead for the Asian American Pacific Islander chapter of the Liberated Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum, and also serves the students of California as the Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Professional Learning, and also my co-director at EMAC, J.R. Mwanga, who also serves as the National Coordinator for the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies. I know the last 4 years, it's been such a heated battle for the access of ethnic studies in our school. So I'm excited to bring up these two guests to share what's been happening and how we can support. So let's give a warm mabuhay to Tracy and J.R.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here.
What's up, everyone?
Right.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
I think Cameron's going to bring up our slides for us, right, Cameron? All right. Well, again, just want to thank FIERS for having us come on to speak about this legacy issue. Since we started FIERS a number of years ago, ethnic studies has always been a priority of ours. We'll get into introductions, a little bit more introductions in a little bit, but if ethnic studies saved your life like it did mine, we'd love to see it in the chat. Blow that chat up, and any questions you already have, please put in the chat as well so we can try and answer them at the end of our presentation, as well as through the chat. Also, we'd also love to hear what's happening with ethnic studies in your district. So if we can go to the next slide. JR, you want to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm JR Adamwanga, he, him. Like Nikki mentioned, I'm the co-executive director of Empowering Marginalized Asian Communities. And before this work and currently in this work, I was a longtime high school ethnic studies teacher for over a decade, helping to fight for and teach and organize the first high school ethnic studies courses and programs, first in San Francisco Unified. What's up to all my SF family, then to Oakland Unified, what's up to my town family, and then back home in Stockton Unified, what's up to my Stockton family. And now I do a bunch of different things, but one of them as well includes being the national coordinator for the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies, which is currently the only national coalition fighting to protect, defend, and build true ethnic studies across the country.
All right, thanks, JR. And thank you for the introduction. On my bio as well, and just a little bit more. I'm a second generation Filipino American wife and mother of 4 kids, coming to you from Ohlone land in Union City, home of James Logan High School and Ethnic Studies Department. And we've had a graduation requirement since the 1990s. I'm also, as was mentioned, faculty for Liberated Ethnic Studies co-chair the Asian American Pacific Islander chapter with Eunice Ho, and really, really excited about that work because we've been able to support a number of teachers and administrators across the state of California. And as part of FIERCE, I am the immediate past president of FAAC, the Filipino American Educators Association of California. Dr. Robin Rodriguez, hey sis, is our current president. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And just to give you some information on Assembly Bill 101. And that's really what we've been working on for a number of years now, because as you know, it was signed in October of 2021 after 3 vetoes of different iterations. Assembly Bill 101 requires an ethnic studies course to graduate from high school, right? Amazing news. But what that means is there's schools and school districts across the state of California that are trying to implement, get courses up, getting teachers, ready to teach it. And so that in 25-26, that will be the first year that incoming ninth graders will have to take it. And then it counts towards graduation, right, in 2030. A number of school districts across the state, like New Haven Unified, San Francisco, Stockton, have implemented their graduation requirements years and years ago. But again, folks, with 1,000 school districts across the state of California, it is still in the works. Included in Assembly Bill 101 is what folks are calling the guardrail language. It's actually Ed Code 220. 220 exists as is. It is Assembly Bill 101 is probably the only bill where it includes specifically in the language this, this educational code. And if you look up Educational Code 220, it basically says that it's put into place to protect students, specifically students of color, from racism, bias, and discrimination. But what that guardrail language, which was put in at the last minute by the Jewish Caucus and by the author Jose Medina, it has become problematic. And that's one of the issues that JR will talk about in a little bit, because it's used as what, folks sometimes call, and this is not a true term, but reverse racism. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So here are the issues that we are currently dealing with when we think about implementing Assembly Bill 101, right, and the graduation requirement for ethnic studies, is basically who gets to teach ethnic studies. There is no current teaching credential. The California Commission on Teacher Credentialing says that if you have a social studies credential, then you are qualified to teach ethnic studies. But if you look at the coursework and the credential requirements for social studies, ethnic studies is not a huge part of it. It is a very, very minute part. But it also doesn't talk to, what is included in ethnic studies and how to teach ethnic studies, right? Dr. Allison Tintianco-Cabales always talks about there's ethnic studies content and there's ethnic studies pedagogy, and those honestly go hand in hand. Teachers need specific ethnic studies professional development, again, on what to teach and how to teach it. School administrators at the district level and at the school level need professional development as well, so they know how to best support it, whether it's through funding, how to observe classes and other resources, who to contract with and consult and bring the experts in. And this is actually the research that that I'm just finishing up and will present in the next month for my dissertation. But administrators hold a lot of power in terms of making decisions, especially as fiscal agents for schools and school districts. Which gets us to funding. The state of California provided one-time funding in the form of different categorical grants a few years ago, but ongoing funding needs to happen. So we have resources like the local control funding formula, which is how many school districts are funded off of. And a provision within that is for districts to create their local control accountability plan. School sites also have to create a school plan. And all of this is attached to funding. So we definitely need more funding needed for training and planning time so that teachers can, go and attend professional development, also have planning time, because as we know, many of us know that planning for ethnic studies content and being able to continue to be in community with other ethnic studies practitioners only helps our students in the long run. I'll go ahead and turn it over to JR for issue number 2, and that's the next slide.
Thanks for that, Tracy. And so what are the protections in place, right, for ethnic studies practitioners and really just ethnic studies in general? And Tracy mentioned that with AB 101, there were some iterations of the model curriculum in particular, particularly in pushing back around issues of including Palestinian American and Arab American lessons in the model curriculum. And as we're starting to see, I think a lot of folks have noticed since October 7th, but, well beyond and well before, is that oftentimes when advocating or being in solidarity with Palestinian studies, we're seeing accusations and have had accusations of anti-Semitism, right? Not just in California, but throughout the state. And this has led to loss of contracts with districts and trying to support the fidelity and implementation of ethnic studies, all the way to teachers, students, and families, and requesting that Palestinian American voices and curriculum are included in the ethnic studies courses, right? We know that Palestinian American studies deserves to be not only in Asian American studies, but ethnic studies, because ethnic studies is a decolonial praxis, right? And even since '68 in the Third World Liberation Front, we know that Arab American allies have fought for ethnic studies to exist, right? And so these, we can't talk about protections unless we also talk about like the current, challenges, the opposition. Tracy also mentioned the accusations of reverse racism, right? We know all too well, right, particularly in California, that the voices, the histories, the stories of BIPOC folks are never really central in our classrooms, right? As a history, ethnic studies educator for over a decade, when you look at the content standards, they all revolve almost exclusively on a Eurocentric point of view. And ethnic studies asks us for the first time to center the majority population of California, which are BIPOC people, right? And as we know, when power, is being fought for, the opposition will often accuse the other side of acting in quote unquote oppression or quote unquote reverse racism, when really all we're asking for is a seat at the table, and for that our stories, our voices, our identities to be honored and included in our own education, right? Attacks also include, from the opposition, many public record access requests, which essentially, if you're a public servant, anyone can request public institutions for any public records, right? And the opposition have used this tactic to essentially stall our movement and to take us away from the real work, right? So imagine you as a teacher, as an ethnic studies teacher or person at your district office trying to support this work through and through, and all of a sudden you're getting a request for every single lesson in ethnic studies, every single mention of ethnic studies, every single mention of anything related to ethnic studies, which can often take hours and hours of your time and your capacity, right? Again, another tactic to stall the implementation and fidelity of ethnic studies. And then, at the end of the day, we've also seen lawsuits by conservative folks, by Zionist folks, in effort to stall ethnic studies locally and nationally as well. And so what are the protections in place, right? I think the biggest protection is people power. Ethnic studies has always been a people power movement, has been fought for and protected by people, not only here in California, but across the country and essentially across the world. And Tracy and I are here today to again call on our folks, call on our community to help us to continue to protect and defend and build true ethnic studies in California and across the country.
All right. So as JR said, we are calling you to action. Next slide, please. So if you are any of these or all of these are just some examples of what we need you to do. So if you are a community member, if you are a parent, we need you to learn about ethnic studies. And if ethnic studies saved your life, then you know exactly how powerful ethnic studies can be, not just for us as a community of color, but for everyone, right? To get to this place of equality and freedom that we have been struggling for ever since. So learn about ethnic studies. You know, if your student, is taking a course, ask the questions. And for Liberate Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Consortium and through our national organization, the Coalition for Liberate Ethnic Studies, we will be hosting some pop-ups in the near future for professional development, and that is open to the community and the parents if you want to know more about, you know, what ethnic studies is and what it looks like and what it feels like, especially if you've never experienced it before. Before I turn it over to JR, I'll just call out our elected officials. You know, you're at the table. Our late sis and friend and colleague, Dr. Dawn Mabalon, she always used to say, just bring that chair, right? Bring the chair to the table. Just bring your own chair. And I think she said, just put it on top of that table if you need to. And so if you are at that table, you know, who else can you bring to the table? Who can you bring to help a voice? And we really need protection for ethnic studies. There's a lot of other elected officials, folks in higher positions of power that are intimidating and, you know, increasing that fear factor through different strategies. And I know school district and administrators who get phone calls, and it's a scary place to be in when you get a phone call from an elected official or someone in a higher position saying, do not partner with particular folks, do not, you know, re-up this contract. So we all need to be in solidarity, especially if we are at the table. JR,
Right.
What do you say about teachers and students?
Right, as a teacher, right, as we gear up for 2030, understand, what does the ethnic studies program look like in your district? What does it look like in your community? Are you partnering with students, the community, parents, ethnic studies experts to help develop that in fidelity and making sure it's true ethnic studies and not a watered down multicultural approach? Food, fabrics, and festivals, really looking at systems, really looking at power, really centering our identities to transform the world, right? And then the next slide, I know our time is almost up. Ways that you can support, right? One big thing is that we're going to have a couple lobby days, one for the coalition at our Ethnic Studies Day at the Capitol on April 17th, and our Fierce Lobby Day, of course, on April 30th. But please, on the next slide, you can join the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies. Please add, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, on Facebook. We can connect you, right, to any of the districts. We're all over California, as you can imagine, right? This is a 60+ year legacy, as well as folks who may be joining us across the country, right? We're all over all 6 regions of the country as well. Join our coalition, support our numerous campaigns, right? I know a lot of folks here love and support Dr. Allison Tintianco Cabales in particular. We have a campaign in Pajaro Valley Unified School District as her ethnic studies contract with the Community Responsive Education was canceled because of, again, false accusations of anti-Semitism. So please support our California campaign, Allison's campaign, other ways to support, including a lot of beautiful merch. You can use the QR code or go to ethnicstudies-coalition.org. I think we have one more slide. I hand that to Tracy.
So we would love to stay in touch. So as you can see, here's our contact information. I think JR and I are on Facebook and Instagram as well. But if you have any specific questions, please put them in the chat. And as we log off, we'll answer them as best as we can. Right. So thank you so much to Fierce for having us. It's been a pleasure always being involved. Shout out to Gabe, my former MC. It's kind of weird being on this end as just a presenter and not an MC, but Cameron and Nikki, you are doing an amazing job. Thanks, JR, for partnering with me.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Nikki. I'll see you all both soon.
Absolutely. And thanks so much, Tracy and JR, for taking the time to lead our first policy deep dive today. This is such an important issue in our community. And I remember being a college student and learning more about ethnic studies. And that was really a way for me to, learn more about myself. And so as you said, we have to make sure that we hold our elected officials accountable to ensuring that folks in our community have the benefits of ethnic studies. And so we will keep doing that. And thank you both again for being here.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So we will move on to our second, second policy deep dive for today, and that is SOMCAN. And so I am very, very happy to introduce you all to Angelica Cabaldon, who is the executive director at SOMCAN. Angelica has 20 years of experience in community organizing, policy, and campaign work, as well as guiding and growing nonprofit infrastructure. Born in the Philippines and immigrated to the US at the age of 8 years old, she has organized on tenant, environmental justice, language and workers' rights issues, led coalition work around community planning, including getting the resolution passed for Soma Pilipinas, the Filipino Cultural Heritage District in SF, and built the leadership and civic engagement of parents, tenants, and workers. I'll let you take it away.
Hi, magandang umaga, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for having us. We're really excited to be part of FIERS and, upping up our work, our organizing work in the state level, because a lot of things are happening in the state now that trickles down to the locals. So we're really excited to be here, and thank you for having us. If I could have the slides, please. Just a brief thing about SOMCAN while that's coming up. There we go. This is one photo of the tenants we were organizing with. Itigil ang eviction means stop the evictions. Just wanted to translate that. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to talk briefly about SOMCAN, what's going on with the housing crisis, how AB 1657 can help minimize some of this housing pressure, and also a Q&A if there's time. Next slide, please. So real quick, SOMCAN, we were founded in 2000. We're a multi-issue, multi-strategy organization. We work on policies, build civic engagement of immigrants, especially the Filipino community. We work on policy campaigns, advocacy, and of course, organizing. We gotta organize our folks from youth to seniors, right? And we also engage a lot on electoral work, particularly around propositions and ballot measures. Next slide, please. And here is some of our programs. We actually combine direct service and organizing because we know in order for us to organize our folks, we need to address the everyday needs, everyday struggle that they're facing. However, we organize because we know the root cause may be workers' discrimination or tenants getting evicted. Those things are systemic issues, and in order to make systemic change, we need to actually organize and build a collective power. Next slide, please. We are also, aside from being a multi-strategy organization, we are a membership organization where we have, members consisting of youth, seniors, workers, women, and tenants and workers. Next slide, please. Sorry if I'm talking hella fast. I do that because I'm nervous. So let's dive into the housing crisis. But before we dive into the state bill, right, I want to first share some definition of the impacts of the housing crisis. And I want to offer some definition to you that we use here at SOMCAN. Next, please. First, we want to offer the definition of gentrification. What is gentrification? Why do you hear that a lot when people are talking about the housing crisis, right? And it's basically it's a process where individuals like landlords or real estate investors, government and businesses better the neighborhood and displace the people that live there, right? And they are gentrifying the neighborhood because of the increased value of land. When the land value goes up, of course, the rent is going to go up, and it's also going to be hard for property owners to keep up with their mortgage, right? And this really hurts people of color, us, right? All of us, immigrants, and especially the elderly, our seniors, our lolos and lolas who are in a very fixed income. Next slide, please. Another definition we want to share with you is displacement, right? When there is gentrification, it displaces people. It displaces the current people that's living there. And that's really when residents are forced to move out, even though they don't want to move. A lot of times here at SOMCAN, we meet a lot of tenants who are generations living in a unit in the South of Market, and second, third generation, and they don't want to move because their kids are going to the school here, or their family and their services are in the area, but a lot of them are being displaced and being forced out of their community. Next, please. And this slide, I wanted to share some of the factors that contribute to gentrification and displacement, right? Real estate companies like BlackRock and other real estate companies that devours our housing stock so they could actually sell it for more income, buying off cheap housing and apartments, especially rent-controlled buildings, and flipping them, right? Also, city and state official can actually hurt and contribute to gentrification and displacement by having anti-renters legislation bills or changing the zoning of our communities to actually make way for new downtown interests or other ideas, right? Landlords, of course, contributes to gentrification and displacement because, they harass their tenants, they threaten them. We had situations where even the landlord would threaten the youth when their parents are not home, right? When their parents are at work. Using Ellis Act eviction, and Ellis Act is a state mandate, right? So that's why it's really important to engage in state level work. And lastly, for-profit developers, they're, when they're developing luxury housing or prioritizing that and changing zoning, a lot of times here in San Francisco, we are bumping against developers, not because we're against development. We want to see good development in our neighborhood, right? We want to see our community thrive. But what happens is a lot of times when they change their zoning or change the use of their property, they actually sell that after they get all their entitlement to the next developer. And, a lot of times by the time you see these housing, it's like 5-10 years later, but there's already gentrification and displacement impact to the community. Next slide, please. So just wanted to share with you guys some of the factors that contribute to that. And for here at SOMCAN, we actually have a certain framework that we use to actually combat that, right? We look at how can we protect our existing tenants and our housing stock? How can we preserve those housing stock, right? Especially rent-controlled buildings. And how can we produce new housing? May that be single homes or apartments to ensure that people are able to live in those affordable housing, right? And on the bottom part is just some of the tactics I wanted to highlight that we use. Definitely you can't get out of the educating, organizing, and mobilizing our folks. It's it's the long-term tactic that we need to do to ensure that generations future generation actually has the tool to combat, or fight for their rights, right, ongoing, right? Because a lot of these rights are not given to us. And as you heard in previous speakers, even though we are able to win a lot of these things, we got to continue being engaged and monitoring, because, different public officials change, and you got to make sure the new ones continue the values and principles of the things that you fought for. Of course, rallies, and then for us here in San Francisco, we also organize tenants per building, even blocks, so they actually get to know their neighbors and are able to work and support each other. We also work with public reps, right? This is not just about like rubbing elbows and things like that. It's really making sure that they're accountable, that they stick to the promises that they said they're gonna do, and also ensure that we could actually come at them with policies that we think are good and that they should actually push forward for. Really pro-people policies, right? And lastly, another tactic which we use is participating in ballot measures. Next slide, please. So now we're gonna get into Assembly Bill 1657. Oops. Next slide, please. So Assembly Bill 67, as we all know, California is in the midst of the housing crisis. We're all feeling it, regardless if you're a renter or a homeowner, right? Major cause of our housing is the mismatch between the supply of housing and the need for housing. And what I mean by that is, there are developments happening. There are apartments or luxury apartments being built, but the problem is, can we actually afford to live there? Can we actually stay in our existing homes, right? And those are things that we're trying to address, that happening a lot. And the different income levels, we can't forget that a lot of our lolas are in extreme fixed income, right? They have to make sacrifices. Do they actually pay for rent, or do they pay for their medication or food? They're in a very fixed income, so we can't forget to really think about different income levels when we're building and preserving affordable housing. Just wanted to highlight that in this slide that's in front of you are just some of the datas of, for home ownership. Only 17% of household can afford to purchase single family homes, less than half of the national average, and also less than half of the rate of the start of the pandemic. For renters, there's a lot of rent burden that's happening around. I'm feeling it, you're feeling it, we're all feeling it, right? Half of the renters, 80% of them are low income, and 30% of their income or more are going towards their rent. Usually, the city and state are saying we should only have renters be paying 30%, but the reality is that's not true. A lot of people are paying 45, 50 or more. That's why there's a lot of people that are, cramped into small spaces, because they're trying to really be able to have a roof over their head, even though there's like 5 or 6 or 2 or 3 different families in one unit, right? And lastly, homelessness. In 2023, over 180,000 Californians experienced homelessness on a given night. Californians rank housing, affordability, and homelessness as the 2 most important issues. And this is happening in different parts of the city, not just here in San Francisco. We're seeing it all over, right? From LA to San Diego and other parts. Next slide, please. So how does Assembly Bill 1657, which is the Affordable Housing Bond Act of 24, what's good about this and how is that gonna actually help us, right? I just want to emphasize that this is just one of the bills that's coming up. There's other ones too, but for today's presentation, I'm just focusing on this. Basically, the affordable housing bond is a bond or general obligation, where a municipal bond which provide a way for state and local governments to raise money for projects that may not generate revenue stream directly. Historically, the state has used voter-approved general obligation bonds to fund construction and rehab of affordable housing and support home ownership. This was a bond that there was a bond that passed in 2018 called the Veterans and Affordable Housing Bond Act, which authorized $3 billion funding for various affordable housing programs. However, that bill is ending in the end of the year. That's why there is this new bond, the Assembly AB 1657, before you that we're trying to actually get passed in the November ballot. And the bond would, stated on here that, the bond would fund multifamily housing, capital and subsidy reserves, so like Section 8 and other things. It's also going to go towards housing rehab, preservation, assistance, and also really important tribal housing and farm worker housing, because we have a lot of farm workers here, right? Next, please. So some of the good impacts this bill will have if it passes, it'll build about 30,000 new homes to very low to extremely low housing, which is really important. Preserve and rehab nearly 100,000 homes. Assist over 13,000 families to become homeowners, and this is across the state, right? Will result in tens of thousands of high-paying construction jobs. And what I want to emphasize is, even if this bond passes this year, it's not until 2026 that the government will be tapping into this. Next slide, please. So in my attempt to use Canva, don't mind the people. But anyways, just wanted to let you know just the roadmap of this bill, right? Like where it has been. I didn't get to include every single committees it went through because it's gonna take too long, but it was introduced as a first reading at the State Assembly in February of last year. And this is how long things take, right? Like another person raised up, it's the organizing starts way in advance, right? It's not just when you go to the ballot, right? Just want to highlight this April 9, the Assembly Sub 5 meeting, which is the budget in the state, is going to be hearing this this bond. There's going to be a social media action on the 15th. On the 18th, there's going to be another hearing. And, we hope that you could join us on the FilAm Advocacy Day on April 30th to talk to our elected officials to actually support this. We have currently 24 public officials that's supporting this. It'll be good to have more. We're really focusing on Rivas to actually put this forward. And then from, as stated here, from February to June, it's a lot of work and organizing and advocating to make sure that this is in the November ballot. And after June, we got to start, educating voters and even non-voters, because, everybody has a role in getting things done, right? Even if you're not a voter, you could help educate your community, educate your family members about this ballot measure, and in November, hopefully it pass and we could dance in the street and celebrate. Next slide, please. So I really hope that, I'm sorry I went through this hella fast, but I really hope that you could join us, join SoundCan, join Fierce Coalition, and really let's make this statewide thing happen and get this housing bond passed, because we're gonna need all of us, right, to make that happen. And that concludes my presentation. Next, please. If you guys have any question, yeah, pass it back to you guys.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Angelica. I'll pass it over to Nikki to bring us to our next part.
Nikki, sorry, I don't think we could hear
I'm
you.
so sorry. I've been on mute rambling. Thank you again to presenters. I left with a lot of follow-ups and next steps for myself on how I can stay more informed and get more involved. So for our next panel joining us, we have elected and previously elected officials who will be speaking on how we can, as community members, build partnership with those in seats. And remember, they can't be in these seats without us. And Karen brought it up earlier, is that we have to keep them accountable. So to moderate this panel, we have Bobby Roy, who comes from a multi-generational family of labor activists and has used this as inspiration as an activist for SEIU Local 1000 and cross-racial solidarity. Let's give another warm welcome, Mabuhay, to our next panel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bobby Roy, just as Nikki mentioned, and I have the proud privilege and honor to introduce you to our next set of panelists. In no particular order, I want to introduce the Honorable Gabriel Quinto, council member for the city of El Cerrito, originally elected back in 2014. For the sake of time, I'm just going to move quickly, but you can read all of their full bios in the participant packet that was emailed to you. Our second panelist is, again, the Honorable Christopher Cabaldon, former mayor of the city of West Sacramento. And Mayor Cabaldon was actually elected back in 1996 to the city council and served as mayor of West Sacramento for 20 years, and is, currently doing amazing and wonderful things as well. So please give Mayor Cabaldon a round of applause. And then, of course, our final panelist is the Honorable Melissa Ramoso, the council member of the city of Artesia. I'm sorry, council member and former mayor of the city of Artesia. Mayor Ramoso was actually ran for office back in 2013, and in 2018 was elected to become the city council member and became mayor in 2021. And so please give a round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you all for being here. For the next about 25 minutes or so, we're going to answer a few questions about how we build partnerships with our electeds, partnerships that not only benefit our community as the FilAm community, but also the broader community in which we operate and reside in. So let's see. Let's start with Councilmember Quinto. In the earlier panel, there was a little bit of talk about co-governance and just that relationship building and working together to govern. What are some strategies that you utilize to stay connected with the FilAm community and be able to stay informed as well as learn about the issues impacting it? And after you answer, Councilmember Quinto, if either of the other panelists want to chime in, feel free to go ahead.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be joined with my longtime colleagues, Melissa, and to Mayor Cabaldon. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Mayor Cabaldon, who is going to be in the top 2 to be our next state senator. And it's really exciting. We had 2 FilAms that ran, and unfortunately, you can't have 2. So we have Mayor Cabaldon that got there on top. So that's how we work. We support all of our FilAm elected officials, and we mentor all of them. So what we do from day one is to always build the bench. And I learned that from Mayor Cabaldon, but also from my longtime colleague and friend, our current AG, Rob Bonta. And I'm reminded that back in the day when Rob Bonta and I started out, no one would return our phone calls. No one would endorse us. No one would support us. And these are the people in our area that wanted to keep power. But as soon as Rob, myself, Tony Thurman got in, we had this explosion of FilAm elected officials getting in, and we see this now statewide. So, working on every level. I'm the elected 4-time Democratic Central Committee member for Contra Costa County. I work that way politically. I'm also will be the first president of the League of California Cities, first FilAm president. And, we're just the beginning. So I want to make sure that Filipino Americans follow what we are doing. So it's always building a bench.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mayor Cabaldon, Mayor Ramoso, anything to add?
Sure. Well, just, good morning, everyone. Sorry, my internet's a little grainy. It's raining here in Southern California, and I literally was helping Public Works take out a tree branch out of the street. So bear with me and this rain and how my internet connection's working. But wanted to say thank you to Fierce Coalition, Lead Filipino, and Bobby for moderating this. It's an honor to be on this panel with Filipino elected leaders who I've looked up to through the years. So Mayor Quinto, Mayor Cabaldon, you have been such an inspiration to me. But in terms of how I keep on track with connecting with, staying up to date with the Filipino community. I was a young staffer more than 20 years ago. So I had no idea what I was doing. And I had no idea what I was doing in policy or what it meant to be a staffer. So what I did is I literally researched who the Filipino organizations were, who were the leaders, and I just watched and observed through the years. And eventually, got to know my elders and got them to trust me as I was trusting them with the information that they were giving to me. So that's how I keep in track of what's happening in the community. And the people that I look up to, the people who they're looking at as well, are people who I'm following to make sure that, there's going to be people after me, because it doesn't end here with us as elected.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby, for the question, and thanks. It's really an honor to be with Melissa and Gabe and you, Bobby, as well, and everyone. And it's such a good question. I as you mentioned, Bobby and Gabe also talked about. I'm going to be the Democratic nominee for the state Senate in our district here in the North Bay, Yolo County, Sacramento County, Sonoma, Napa, a little bit of Sacramento as well. And this will be the first time that we've ever had a Filipino American in the state Senate. And we currently don't have any Filipinos in the legislature at all. But my district I'd like to say locally, this is the district that should break that barrier. It's Vallejo, Fairfield, Sassoon, even Yolo and Sacramento, really rich Filipino communities and heritage and history. And also, it's not the most Filipino Senate district in the state. It's number 3. But number 1 and number 2 are in San Francisco and the East Bay, where Filipinos are the 2nd or 3rd or 4th largest API group. In my district, we're number 1. And so I'm really excited about that. But it's also, to me, it's a reminder of the diversity of our community, because my district isn't in the core of the Bay Area. It's not the East Bay, it's not San Francisco, it's not Los Angeles. And so it isn't enough to simply go to NaFFAA meetings or to talk to young progressives or to older community members. It's a rural, working class community, and whose concerns are around, professional licensure and ag policy and farm worker policy, and housing and jobs and wages. in all of those dimensions. And in communities like Vallejo, similar to Daly City and other places where we are a large part of the community and we have political power. And how do we exercise that in coalition? And so under this question of how do you understand, how do you stay connected with the community? I often make fun of my my Anglo political friends in the area who like their way is to go to the Filipino fiesta or to go to a Filipino women's club, coronation ceremony, yell mabuhay and, eat some lumpia and then go out and then like they know what's up, like they know what's happening in our communities. And that's never enough. So I've been an activist. I've been a lobbyist. I've been a nonprofit leader. I've been a small business person. I've been in local government, state government. So I know what it feels like to be in all those places, around the table, under the table, on the menu, everything, and to stay and to have some humility in elected office in particular, and to listen, to empathize, and to try to understand, and then take all of that complexity and all that conflict and find a way to take definitive action and to really make a difference. So thanks for the question. I think it's really important as our community becomes more present, more visible, has more power, that we have more of an obligation even to uplift not just the voice of the Filipino community, but the voices and the stories of our communities as well.
Thank you for that. And just as a follow-up, right, because you've all talked about how, we are within the context of a larger community and a greater community. So in the context of cross-racial partnerships, a subject that I'm very, a strong believer in and organizing, how is it that you navigate the spaces that you're in, especially as electeds, former electeds, to ensure equitable representation for everyone in the community?
Well, I guess I'll start. So I was originally elected to city council in my city, which I think at the time had 11 Filipinos in it. And there were two of us running for city council at the same time in different races. And I won. And when I looked at the precincts, I won because I won the Latino precincts overwhelmingly. And when I was, out talking in the neighborhood picnics and stuff, it's because people were excited to have the first Latino elected to the city council. They didn't know, and so that's great. And now it's my obligation in the next election is to elect actual Latinos to the council and to build that pipeline. So I instantly started appointing commissioners, building those coalitions, but not there were coalitions with communities that were still finding their own voice. The Hmong community in our city, I appointed the very first Hmong planning commissioner in California. So part of it is to not just look for the community leaders, because many communities don't have, like our community there's no single leader. You can't just go to the fiesta and talk. Like you can't just go to the Hmong, to the Sikh temple and just ask the head of the temple. Like they're like any other community. And so thinking about how to, again, to kind of bring forward the broader sense of stories, and then find ways to make coalitions around real issues. And this is what the other issue I was describing earlier. Like Vallejo is the largest city in my district. And Vallejo often struggles with exactly this question. It's by far a majority BIPOC city, but the tensions that are often present and have to get resolved between Filipino political empowerment, Black political empowerment, and other parts of the community are real, and they don't work the same way they do when I was on college campus as either a student or a faculty member. It's like natural coalitions don't just emerge because we believe in progressive, change. They're real fights about who gets the park. Where does the sewer plant go? And so coalition building isn't just a sort of like, let's all march together at that stage. I think there are real battles over stuff that really matters. And so if you don't have that, again, that sense of humility, and that sense that we are going to be living together forever. We are part of the same community, and our struggles are common, even when we achieve power. Right? I think that's it's much easier to build coalition when you're like all locking arms to go fight the establishment. But what happens when you start to become the establishment? When you start to get real power in school boards and city councils and in companies and everything else, then that starts to become the real test of what those coalitions really look like. And I think because we, almost by our nature, in the history and the heritage of our community, in the farm labor movement, the place of the Philippines in colonial history and everything else. We have the potential to be some of the most profound bridge builders among community, a multiracial LGBT community building and what have you. And I'm really proud that so many people, like Brabant is a great example, have excelled at really leaning into that role of not just thinking, how do I build a coalition with the Filipino community, but how can I use the tools that we have, the resources that we have, to uplift all.
Thank you for that. Yeah, a basic thing that's ringing in my head as you speak is, we take space and make space, right? Mm-hmm. And like, that's what we do. It's a basic organizing principle, and it's an equitable principle. And we've also seen the adverse of that, for example, down in Los Angeles, right? Where they were starting to, essentially mess with their own elections to try to retain power at the negative impact to others. Councilmember, Mayor, anything else to add?
I could listen to Chris speak all day, and that's why Chris is who he is. Just to piggyback on what he said, for me, my city was built on Dutch, Portuguese, and Latino, and then actually Filipinos. So it was a matter of just getting to know who these people were, where they congregated, what their issues were, finding out like long-term agreements that were never written down, but making sure we're still upholding these set agreements. So I actually appointed people that I knocked on the door to, not people that I was seeing at the fiestas, like Chris said. It's people who I had actual conversations that wanted to get involved. So I appointed Filipino, Portuguese, the first indigenous person as a commissioner, and also pansexuals. It was a whole diverse group of people that I identified as people who I could see bringing others into the fold. So it's been a beautiful thing to not always have the same recurring faces. And also being Filipino, the Portuguese in my community are all Catholic. So where we come together is the local church. And so even though I can go to a Portuguese mass, I have no idea what they're saying, I still know what we're all there for. So it's just finding that common ground and commonality.
Awesome. Councilmember Quinto, anything to add?
No, I completely agree and echo what my colleagues mentioned. We belong to many, many communities and everything that we do every day, not just the FilAm communities. So, many of us in this panel are the first in their city and region. But what we do, and I do this 24 hours a day, every day, is to make sure that our FilAm community is included. It's about diversity, inclusion, diversity, and cities are looking at that and working on that. I know my city is, and making sure that when we see a FilAm from our community, that we meet with them, if they're interested in joining us, make sure that we mentor them. So I was able to put community members and boards and commissions here in my city of El Cerrito, but all of the other things that I do, one of the first FilAm board members for Equality California. I was one of the first board members for the Sierra Club, bringing Asian American FilAms to the environmental movement. It's so important. I'm one of the first FilAms for Civic Well to be on that board. We're just the first, but hopefully not the last. So what I do, when Cameron, who's on this board, when he was interested in becoming an elected official, I made sure that I met with him, that I worked with him, that I introduce him to the powers that can help him rise up the ranks and become elected, to introduce him to our partners in labor. That's what we do. And you look at that, all the other caucuses that gold standard for caucuses is the Latino caucus. So as past president of the API caucus for Cal Cities, I looked very closely at how they were able to succeed. And we went forth and did the same thing. And now we're a powerhouse now. And we have a lot of elected officials. I would like to see more FilAm elected officials in the areas where we've always been, like Stockton, like cities in the valley, like Fresno. I've supported candidates that have run in those areas, ran for mayor. Unfortunately, they didn't make it, but we have to try again.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great segue to my next question, and we're gonna get to some hard tacks with this question. In trying to get folks elected, campaigns cost money. So, specifically in your experience as having run, how do Filipino Americans respond to your calls for financial support? And what are the implications for community power building if they don't respond? Or do we have to do better?
Yeah, we have to do better. Filipinos don't give enough. We have to move away from, we have to do a better job of showing the value of giving, because they may not understand what it takes. Like maybe they're from, they're Philippine born, and so they think everything's corrupt. That's what I hear from the generations that are older. But no, it's like if I see someone who's running, if I have money, any money, I will donate it to them. Especially is this cycle with all these Filipinos that were running. If I haven't cut a check yet, it's going to come. I just need to make sure that other people understand the importance and it's sad that it takes a lot of money to run for office. And I don't know if that will ever change. But it's a matter of, I think, Filipinos understanding that it's important to give money. And also, it's also the candidates too. It's whether or not they trust them and if they're genuine in their intentions. So that's another big factor.
Yeah, thank you. Any of the other panelists?
I agree with my colleague Melissa. We need to do better, much better. And unfortunately, the Filipino American community has, we see other groups like the Koreans and the Chinese and the Vietnamese that do a much, much better job. To tell you the truth, I've never gotten any help from the Filipino community because, they look at San Francisco, Daly City, LA, they don't look at the suburbs. But we have more elected Filipino electeds in the suburbs, and that's it. It's hard to get into San Francisco and Los Angeles. I've supported Jessica Caloza, who could be the first in the Los Angeles area in the assembly, and also Maxion Filauer, who I have supported the last 3 times. But politics gets in the way, and that's where we're at, and we get stereotyped as either being Republicans or too liberal, and and that's what the stereotype is for Filipino elected officials. We have to fight that, and we have to just be out there. And I believe not just supporting our FilAm community, but supporting all Asian American communities and the LGBT communities, and keeping close ties with the other caucuses. It's collaborating together to get the best candidate. And I hope we see that with Mayor Cabaldon, because I'm going to be there supporting him to make sure he gets elected in November. This is one of the races that I think Filipino Americans need to be active and to get one of ours in there, along with Jessica Caloza. So not just, our Attorney General, but there's others as well, like Mayor Cabaldon, like Jessica Caloza, like Maxion Filauer, and we all need to work regionally to make sure this happens.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Gabe. And I'd add a couple of things. I think first is we can mobilize. I think in this Senate race in the primary, and you're part of this, Bobby, and SacFilPac and others. I think between Rosana Verdera Liga and I, the 2 Filipino candidates in the race, I think together we raised $50,000 from the FilAm community principally in in the district and just adjacent. Between us, we raised almost $1 million. So $50,000 is not nothing. That's 5% of the spending. And so it's not like it's it's in our genes that we can't get engaged. The other thing I would say though is that we did that, and then $4 million was spent by other groups in our race. And so one of the things I think that we haven't had a strategy on in our community is that there's our own giving, which I completely agree we have to do better, and we have examples where we have done at least somewhat better. But the other area is that we're all, so many of our community members are in tech, they're in labor unions, they're in organizations and institutions that spend lots of money in politics. And so it's just as important for, you've got your SEIU logo on there, Bobby, that SEIU members who are Filipinos, like inside SEIU are saying, no, we need to back Filipino, we need to back some of these Filipino candidates. If you work for, a company that does that, then you should be doing the same thing. And so it's in addition to tapping our own checkbooks, if we have them, it's also looking for the resources that we can help direct that are already out there, where we have increasing influence in the FilAm community. Then the last thing I would say, and having listened to the whole morning and knowing how this works at the local level, is the money part aside, we tend to, not just in our community, but our community is definitely this way, is that we really try to give a lot of love and empathy and support for people to get involved in civic engagement. Like, please get involved, whatever support you need, wraparounds, education, we'll pay you a stipend. We really love that until the moment you decide to run for office, or certainly the moment that you enter office. Then it is, you are the man and we're going to hold you accountable. That's the only line I ever hear. We're here to hold you accountable. It's the same human being that was there when you were, hoping against all hopes that they would take the plunge and go put themselves out there. And I think we've got to find some grace in the way that we engage with elected officials as well. Hold them accountable for sure, but also recognize that they are, Gabe's also got to make his sewer system work properly, and Melissa's trying to figure out how can she afford one more fire truck. I mean, there's a whole set of those other issues out there while they're dealing with folks on the right, or anti-trans activists protesting, or there's so many other things that are happening. And we really, when we say we need more Filipinos to sign up for planning commissions and for school boards and for city councils, it's a hard job. And so in addition to the money, I think we need to do better as a community in not exalting our elected officials like we've done in generations past, or treating them like royalty and all that matters is who gets introduced at the banquet. Not that, but also not, you are by definition corrupt, and you don't care about our issues, and you lost who you were, and you haven't even been sworn in yet. That we need to be able to show some love and some grace to folks that are doing the work, and understand that they're trying to build coalitions for these broad issues as well. So.
Thank you for that. And I think all of you in your questions and answers thus far have talked about that relationship, right? When we genuinely have real relationships with people, positive relationships with people, we can have that grace with individuals. Yeah. We can acknowledge their common humanity, our common humanity, and know that if progress is progress, one thing that we say in SEIU is when one person wins, we all win, right? And we can share in that victory, right? And so we understand that solidarity is really our survival, and to be in right relationship is like the key. And it's literally our jobs to remember. And when I say remember, I mean like literally put the pieces, the members back together on what it meant to be in right relationship with each other, and make it so that there are no more harm needs, that everyone is able to thrive because there are no harm needs that exist. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Bobby, can I just add one other thing, which is that I mean, your presence is a good reminder of this, but as you said, when one wins, we all win. But most people that run for office lose, right? Most people don't win. And so when one of us loses, we all have to get back up together with them. So, Bobby, you ran for school board, and I know how to. I've lost 2 elections and won 10 of them, or something like that. And I know how that there's that moment when you're Like you don't, it's almost like somebody died or you just got a divorce, like some things in your, like you're not, are you part of the future or not? And we need to be supporting people through not winning and understand that that is as much a contribution to the process as the winning is. You only win by trying a bunch of times. And so we need to provide the space for people that are willing to take those risks and to celebrate them as much after as we did the hope and the anticipation in advance. So thank you, Bobby, for stepping forward to run.
Thank you for that acknowledgement. I know I'm not done yet, even though I wasn't successful. I'm not done yet. I think the other thing too, we focused a little bit on money, right? But we talk about there's organized money and there's organized people, right? And it takes people to win elections as well. Any tips or advice or challenges that you think, maybe barriers that exist within the community to mobilize our Filipino American community in electoral politics?
One thing I wanted to mention, I'm just so proud to see so many of the Filipino American nonprofits like NaFFAA getting out the vote. And when I was an Obama delegate back in the day, there were very few Filipinos that were actually delegates. So to see all the work and to see Filipinos now voting at an all-time high now, except for this past election. I hope we change that in November. Very few people voted in this last primary election. We need to be there and get the vote out. So NaFFAA has done that, and they a machine that I love working with and seeing, and to see so many people from our community participating in that way, and to see Dr. Cortez, who heads up this organization. I've given a couple of scholarships to this group through the years. And just very proud of how you've taken these organizations and you brought it up to another level where people, not just in California, but across the country, can learn from all of you. So you're doing the work and appreciate all that.
Thank you. Mayor Ramoso, anything to add?
Yes, in terms of political organizing, I know this is a C3 conversation, but it actually, for like the 2020 election and now going into 2024, it's really not really the nonprofits that are pushing out the vote. It's all those political powerhouses that we have identified in the community who are trying to mobilize others with like-mindeds. If you want to have that conversation, we can have that separately, because I will totally have that with you. But it was 2020, the first time ever the Filipino American community got what we wanted out of the election in terms of data and everything. And also even appointments, and the most ever in terms of delegates, as Mayor Quinto had mentioned. So we'll have a total separate conversation on that. But when I got this question from the group, organizer, I was thinking about, I think we need to move away from the notion that people just want to be in the background. That's always what I hear with like Filipinos. Like, oh, because I was that person. I said, why would I run? Like, I just like doing what I'm doing, organizing. That's where my bread and butter, my heart is organizing our people. But then my greatest mentor, former mayor of Cerrito, Mark Polito, told me, Melissa, if it's not going to be you, then who will it be? And I was like, oh, that was like straight to my heart, because like if I saw someone else who was leading in a position I knew I could have done, then I would not forgive myself. So I think we need to celebrate our accomplishments and stop with the mahiya. Like let's just shy away. Let's actually step forward into the light. Own that you're president or executive director to an awesome organization and say, yes, it is a collective effort. But, you're chosen to lead for a reason. And I think we need to take that mentality more to just raise our numbers in terms of who's leading. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I see so many people who can be in the position that I'm in now.
Absolutely. And
yeah, and Melissa did that. I mean, you talked about some of the stuff that happened in 2020, but Melissa's being modest in her leadership of Filipino Americans for Biden as well, and helping to make a lot of that happen. I guess I would just add two things. One is that we have the stories that we tell ourselves about why we don't organize, and but folks in the community do want to get engaged. They just don't know exactly how, or it's harder. I know when I first ran for the legislature in 15 years ago, we had our sheets up on the wall at the fiesta and everywhere else. So, volunteer for the campaign, and we took the sheets home, and almost everybody had signed up to bring the food. Like nobody wanted to knock on doors or make the phone calls. Everybody wanted to bring the food. In a more recent one I did, everybody signed up because they wanted to make the reels. The most important part about community organizing is the interaction with people, with voters. So the reels and the food are important, but they don't get it done by itself, and it can be hard in earlier generations. Like I don't feel safe, and I feel anxious about my accent or the way that how are voters in these conservative areas going to react to me and all of that. And today it's also hard for a lot of folks to say, I don't want to knock on a door and potentially talk to a Trump voter. But that's what it is. Like community organizing is going to be is that, and it's the same thing for the electorate. Without talking about any specifics, as Melissa was saying, though, like we can't. Let's just say that there was a legislative district in Southern California we really wanted to focus on, and let's say just hypothetically that district had 10,000 Filipino voters in it. 10,000 is a lot of voters, but it's not a lot compared to what we could be doing statewide. What if we, as a state, all the organizations and the electeds, we said, let's adopt that one district. Let's just focus there. And we're going to make sure we're going to do our best to get every one of those 10,000 voters out, both to win that race, but also to send a clear signal in the community and outside of the community that we got our shit together. And so, I mean, I think we have a great opportunity this year in particular to really be able to organize in a very specific way that will produce real power, real visibility, and then create the path forward. That legislative race I ran way back when, we had one volunteer come by because his mother was a supporter of the campaign. He came by for his very first campaign ever and started knocking on doors in Fairfield and Sassoon City. And afterwards, a couple of months later, he called and said, hey, would you meet me? I was really inspired, and I think I want to get involved in politics. And so I met him in Jack London Square in Oakland, and he's like, I want to get involved. What can I do? And it was Rob Bonta, and that moment and so many others came out of that campaign. So the other thing that we should be continuing to do, and I know Gabe and Melissa do this all the time, and it's what Sac Philpac and others are trying to accomplish as well, is that every time we have a campaign, that campaign it's about winning, but it's also about building the political infrastructure, the pipeline, whether people are going to run themselves or not and become attorney general, or whether they're going to become activists or fundraisers or whatever. That's our moment to really build power, to accelerate and magnify the impact that we're having. Don't let a campaign go to waste.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I mean, I could spend hours with you all and just keep on talking and strategizing and building. We are out of time, though. I want to thank all of you, Mayor Cabaldon, Mayor Ramoso, Councilmember Quinto, for being here. Please continue to do the great work that you're doing as people of goodwill. And thank you for bending the moral arc of the universe towards justice, liberation, and freedom in your roles. So everyone have a good day. I will pass it back to our MCs.
Thanks, y'all. That was a very insightful panel that we had, and I hope you all leave something from their talk today. And I know we're getting close to on time, but we do want to hear from you all. So we talked a lot about the different policies. We talked about ethnic studies, housing, touched on things like language access, voter rights, how to get engaged with elected officials and the current election. So far, what you heard today, what are you really interested in learning about more, learning about advocating for? Make sure to share it with us in the comments too.
Thanks, Nikki. And I just want to say maraming salamat to our amazing panel of electeds who joined us today and spoke about how we can cultivate relationships and partnerships with our elected officials. And one thing that really stuck out to me in the conversation was what Councilor Ramoso had mentioned, which is actually John Lewis' quote, which is, "If not us, then who? If not now, then when?" And if we all have that perspective, we can continue to build power and our collective voice in public service as FilAms. And so we're so proud and thankful of our FilAm electeds for being here. I want to shift the conversation to Advocacy Day. And so I'm very excited to announce that Advocacy Day for the Fierce Coalition will be on April 30. And so that day will be a great opportunity for all of us to bring what we've learned and discussed here today, as well as our full policy package, straight to the Capitol in Sacramento, and talk directly with our legislators to advocate for the bills that impact our entire FilAm community. So before I pass it back to Nikki, I also want to take a brief moment to acknowledge both Transgender Day of Remembrance and Cesar Chavez Day, which we are observing this week. And so I hope we all take this weekend to really take the opportunity to reflect on the importance of those important dates, how we can lift up our trans community here in California, and also reflect on the legacy of Cesar Chavez, who was so really, really important in the building of labor movement here in California and all over the states. So I'll pass it back to you, Nikki.
I know it's amazing to see how much Fierce grows every year. I feel like every year we just keep getting bigger and bigger, and our reach keeps growing bigger. And shout out to all the folks who are new to Fierce and who came on today. We're so excited to have you. I actually have these words printed on my wall, and it comes to me and as a reminder from our ancestor Grace Lee Boggs is the only way to survive is by taking care of each other. And today I felt that. Today I felt that we were all uplifting one another and we were all in this work together. So in the meantime, make sure to stay updated with Fierce. Follow us on Instagram, on our Facebook pages. Make sure to get connected with your local agency or organizations. And we had a few organizations pretty much from every region of California. So you can't say, oh, there's none in my town or there's no one near me. We had a pretty good collection of folks from all over the state. So there's plenty of you for them to join. Special shout out to Lead Filipino, Filipino Advocates for Justice, SOMCAN, SEIU Local 1000, EMAC, SAC-FilPac, NaFFAA, National Coalition of Ethnic Studies, and Asian American Voter Engagement Project, and all the elected officials who joined us today, and many others who are joining us virtually. Our Fierce fam just keeps on growing. To close out our day, I want us to leave us some words to help ground the rest of your weekend. This is from another Stocktonian, Carlos Bulasan, from his poem, "I Want the Wide American Earth." And y'all, I'm not a spoken poet, so please excuse me. But I wanted to make sure we end the day with some grounding and ending our day with some of our ancestors too. We are millions working together. We are building, creating, molding life. We are shaping the shining structures of love. We are everywhere. We are everywhere. Thank you all again for joining us. We'll see you on April 30th, and ingat.
Thank you, everybody.